even for your audience thinking about investing, either flipping or rentals, it's really important to think exit strategy. Flipping is kind of like a last case scenario at this point. So we buy everything hoping that we're going to be able to hold it.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Gentle Art of Crushing It show, where we focus on learning and sharing with our listeners all there is to know about how to create success in our lives. This show stands on the shoulders of giants. Our mission is to empower and inspire our listeners to create the life of their dreams whilst having a blast in the process. Let's celebrate life together. Welcome to the show.
All right, welcome back to the Gentle Art of Crushing It podcast. My name's Randy Smith, and I'm going to be your host today. And I'm really excited to have Justin Campbell with us today. Justin was actually served as a pastor for 16 years. He became a full-time real estate investor just a couple of years ago, but he already owns a property management company. He owns several rentals, and he's got a house flipping business as well. And then to top it all off, he's chaplain for aerial recovery. So, Justin, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you here.
Oh, Randy, thanks so much. My privilege. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, why don't we just go ahead and jump right in? Justin, can you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and how you arrived to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, you kind of gave the big chapter titles, but I've got a unique, I think, on-ramp to real estate investing. Like you said, I was a pastor. I went to Bible college after high school, which is not the typical pathway to real estate investing. I met my wife there, was and still am so captivated by Jesus and his story. And so it was just natural for us after Bible college. We became pastors. We did that for 16 years. We traveled around. We pastored in LA. We pastored in Boston. And it was really an awesome privilege for us to walk with people through their highs and through their lows. So we did that for 16 years, but we both, probably about the 14-year mark, we started to feel this kind of dissonance in our spirit, and we knew that chapter was going to come to a close. And so after our last assignment ended in LA, we decided to move back to my hometown of Great Falls, Montana. And man, it was a leap of faith. We had no idea how we were going to provide for our family. When you kind of dedicate your life to serving in a ministry, vocational ministry like that, it's not like you're really cultivating your resume for anything outside of pastoring. So we had about 6 months of emergency funds saved up, and then my wife is an adventurer at heart, and she said, well, let's give this real estate investing a shot. We've got 6 months to make it work, and if that doesn't work, then it'll be time to try to find something else. And so I had read some books, I'd listened to some podcasts, and I thought, well, I mean, why don't I try to flip a house? And there was what's the most obvious thing to do? And so there's a house that was close to ours, just about a block down. It's the worst house on the block. Terrible foundation. It reeked. It looked horrible. So I made a really low offer. It got accepted, and we started flipping, renovating it. I did a lot of the work myself, and and miraculously, it actually went pretty well. I mean, we made like $30,000 off of it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was like 2 months worth of work, and that almost made up for my salary as a pastor. And
Unreal.
And we're like, and so we decided, okay, we're going to roll that into the next one. We found another one. That one took us about 10 days to do. It was a very simple cosmetic rehab, and we made like $20,000. We're like, this is insane. I mean, and so we rolled it into the next one. I think we started to buy a couple rentals here and there. I had my property management license to manage my own stuff, started managing family stuff. People started asking me to manage their stuff, and I said no for a long time. I thought it would be a distraction to our primary goals. And after we said no enough, my wife came to me and she said, I think maybe you're passing up a really good opportunity. And so we got an LLC, we opened up, and that's been going really well. more we flipped, the more we realized, hey, I think we could burr some of these and end up keeping them. And so, long story short, so we got into real estate investing through a hard pivot that nobody else saw coming, especially us.
That's amazing. What a story too. It's 16 years serving,
Yeah.
and really being selfless, and you and your wife spending all of those years going all over the country. That's amazing. And then I think it's interesting how you said you could tell probably a couple of years before that there was going to be some transition.
Mhm.
So is that when you started reading books and podcasts and this, doing the research? That was when it kind of started at that point,
Yeah,
or?
that was it. We had when we were in Boston, when we transitioned from Boston to LA, we sold our house in Boston, and the market had appreciated enough that I think we made 30 grand off our house. And
Okay.
so my wife and I, we decided that we were going to invest in a duplex in my hometown of Great Falls. So we bought a duplex with that money. But it was going to be so difficult you know, with our job at that point to be really involved with real estate. So,
Sure, sure.
once we knew that transition was coming, it was kind of like, I think real estate could be exciting and there's some opportunity there. And
Are you interested in real estate investing but don't know where to get started or think you don't have the time or money? Are you stuck in your W-2 because the golden handcuffs make it hard to walk away? If this sounds like you, check out embarkedequity.net and schedule some time to talk with the founder, Randy Smith. Randy went from massive income to leaving his W-2 through passive income, and he can help you do the same. www.embarkedequity.net.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think and then you talk about buying that first flip. And I would imagine there's got to be, like, you're super excited that there's this flip that they accepted. And then secretly you're probably thinking, oh no, they accepted
oh
my
my,
offer, right? Maybe I offered too much. Maybe who knows what I'm getting into.
that's
So tell me
exactly
about
it.
that a little bit. I would imagine that was a little frustrating, a little
Yeah.
scary, all kinds of emotions.
Yeah, well, as you know, flipping a house, there's stages to it. It's not like you
Yeah.
buy it and then you just do it, so every new stage was brand new to us. And with every new stage, it brought like a new level of stress. And we're like, so
Sure.
you're exactly right. You buy a house and we're like, oh my goodness, we've never paid this much money before, and that's a lot of money out. So there's that stress. How is the project going to go? Every new thing that went wrong, the foundation had to get repaired, and sort of like we've never done that before. And so kind of
Yeah.
each new phase brought a new level of stress. And once you close on it on the backside, then you're like, oh, okay, we made it. We finally made it.
And the whole time it's stressful because you think it's going to sell for a certain dollar
Yep,
amount, but you never really know what it's going to sell for
exactly.
until that offer comes in.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. So I know, being a pastor for all those years, there probably was not real significant income. Um, and so when you went to go buy this first flip, a lot of people run into challenges where, like, how do you finance
Yeah.
this thing on the front end? So I'm curious, how did you guys finance that first deal?
Yeah, so we use private money. Actually, we still use private money to this day.
Okay.
And it's been different people. Sometimes it's family. Sometimes it's somebody with, money in their retirement account that they can roll into, a
Self-directed.
self-directed IRA, and then they can loan off of that. The private money lender that we use now is actually our kid's orthodontist that we just struck up a conversation. I told him what we did, and he said he would be
No kidding.
interested in it, and so that's a partnership that's worked out really well. But I can guarantee you, I've talked to a lot of people about private money, and almost everybody has somebody in their network that can act as private money if they just know how to kind of piece it together a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm curious. So that's something that's intriguing to me, and I hear a lot of people in your space use private money. And I did it did it just turn out to where you're talking about this with pretty much everybody you're talking to, or is it just a few select people that maybe you think might have some additional funds, or what does that look
Yeah,
like?
great question. It really does. You end up being a broken record. Everybody you talk to, yeah, at least for us, we're so excited about real estate investing. It was such a new thing that it was natural to come. It wasn't like we were trying to force it into every conversation. But when you're really
Sure.
passionate about something, it tends to come up in conversation. And
Yeah.
and so yeah, we talk to a lot of people about it.
Yeah, and I think most people that it's a lot easier to get into that space than what a lot of people think. People that have old 401ks or people that have left jobs or even people that are just saving cash on the side that don't want to have all their money in the stock
Yeah.
market. I would imagine most people that are out there have access to a few folks like you and
Yeah.
I that could actually put their money to work. So I'm curious, what type is every deal different, or do you have kind of like a set fee that you pay to folks, or is there a range that you usually fall into, or what does that look like for the
Yeah,
investors?
it's a great question. So it depends if you're using. So there's kind of you delineate it. There's hard money lenders, and those are typically institutional lenders, and then you've got private
Yeah,
money lenders. The terms will be different. So hard money lenders usually there's point fees, there's interest fees, and those are going to be higher than a private money lender.
got it. Okay, so say you're borrowing 100 grand, there might be 1 or 2 points that you pay right up front, which means, say if it's 2 points, you're going to pay two thousand
That's
dollars,
right.
and then you're paying some percentage, probably somewhere between, I don't know, 7 and 10 or 12%, depending on how quickly and how badly you need it.
That's exactly
And
right.
then usually there's like some time period too. Do you generally kind of guarantee your folks a certain amount of time, or is it just based on the project that you're doing?
Yeah, and so we write that all there's a couple documents. We file them with the county, and we make sure that the terms are all spelled out. And it does depend on the scope of work for the project. We try to recycle money every 6 months, and so that our lender doesn't
Okay.
have money sitting out longer than that. Um, so that's kind of typical, but it does change based off of the project.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that can be a really valuable investment option for individuals that are sitting on the side. It's more liquid
Hmm.
than a lot of the syndications that you hear. And sometimes, but not always, they're in a first position lien, usually first position or sometimes a second position lien.
Hmm.
Is that how you structure those loans for your investors as well?
Yeah.
Or
So at this point, for most deals that we use private money on, uh, we'll borrow the purchase price plus the rehab for it.
perfect.
So that's kind of how that works.
Okay. Yeah, no, I know that I was doing the Burr strategy in Atlanta for a number of years. And when I was keeping those assets, generally the bank was making me season those assets for, I think it was usually 6 months. I
Yeah,
don't remember if it was 6 months from is it the purchase price time or is it when it's completed? I don't recall.
from purchase.
Okay. So if you buy an asset in January, you renovate it for a couple of months, you're still going to end up needing that hard money for the full six
Right.
months because you can't do your cash out refi in the back end unless you're just flipping you know, in 10 days, like the one deal that you
Yeah,
had.
that's right.
Uh, okay, perfect. Well, very good. So, I'm always intrigued with this space because the idea of being a flipper sounds exciting. We've all watched HGTV and we've got all these great ideas. Any challenges or lessons along the way that might be valuable for other folks that are considering getting into that space?
I think the biggest hurdle that I had to overcome is the feeling that I had to do all of the work. And I just
Okay.
kind of came to the point where I realized that if I'm doing all of the work, I'll never be able to scale because I can, myself, I could probably do two a year. But if I want to do
Okay.
20 a year, you've got to build teams. And so you can't be swinging a hammer at that point.
Hmm.
You're either GCing or you're overseeing your project managers at that point. And so that was
Okay.
the biggest thing for me is, if you want to do one or two a year, that's great. Go swing the hammer. But if you want
Yeah.
to scale, if you actually want to make it a business, then you have to run it as a business and not be the
Mhm.
employee inside of the business.
Got it. So letting go and kind of turning over the reins to somebody else, I would imagine, is challenging. So did you just start hiring folks right away, or was there a process of letting go of some of that,
Yeah.
or what did that process look
Yeah, it
like?
probably took us to flip number 5 before I stopped doing anything in it and was
Okay.
just hiring project managers and I would still bring teams of people in to do various things. Uh,
Okay.
but that became a much more efficient seat for me, especially running the property management and doing this. the more I'm doing in the business, the less we can grow as a business.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the property management piece a little bit. I know property management can be kind of a thankless job. There's not always a lot of profit in there.
Mhm.
What has that journey been like? I know you said you were saying no to folks over and over and over, but then the wife brought to your attention that maybe there's some opportunity there.
Yeah.
So let's dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, so we officially launched um, August of 2022. So we're just over a year old. We've got about 200 doors at this point. And it was a
Wow.
similar journey. I was doing everything. I was doing all of the leasing, the work orders. I was doing all of the work. And again,
Yeah.
painfully obvious, you can only do that for so long, and you can't do it at all if you want to grow. And so we've just grown teams out. And so we really try to leverage technology in teams. We've
Okay.
got a team of virtual assistants that are able to do a lot of the back end stuff. And then, one of the skill sets that actually did transfer from pastoring to this is building teams. And
Hmm.
it turns out that it's a lot easier to build a team when you can pay people when they're volunteers.
I would
Yeah,
imagine. I would imagine.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, so that you've got 200 doors at this point in 1 year. Now, what does the team look like? You mentioned VAs, but do you have like W-2 employees as well, or?
So everybody's contractors at this point. So
Okay.
so we've been able to structure it like that. It tends to work out better for them for flexibility. Works out better for me just from an overhead standpoint.
Yeah,
So I've
sure.
got VAs, I've got a bookkeeper, and then I've got a handy person. And
Okay.
between, I think that's four teammates besides myself, and we're
Okay.
able to handle everything pretty efficiently. We're in the process of hiring an operations manager, and that will
Okay.
allow me to take one step further to, you know, keep focusing on acquisitions.
Fantastic. And then the flipping business as well, is that got a whole staff of people, or is that just all subcontractors behind the
That's it.
scenes, or?
Yep, that's exactly it. My wife recently quit her job, and so she's kind of serving as project manager going forward. We've got enough contractors that are working almost exclusively for us because of the amount of projects, and so she's just
Yeah,
bouncing between projects, making sure that timelines are on track, and the scope of work,
sure.
everybody's doing what they say they're doing, contracts are in, and all of that kind of stuff.
I'll, I love it. And then you're the CEO that's managing the managers and getting your hands dirty from time to time. I would
That's right.
imagine
Yeah.
still,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Yeah. Well, very exciting. So, yeah, I'm curious. What is the next 2 to 3 or 2 to 5 years look like for what you guys are
Yeah.
doing?
Well, especially for property management, that's probably the easiest one to foresee um, how we can scale it. So we're in Montana. We've got some very distinct markets in Montana, and because
Yep.
licensure is different state to state, we really want to become a statewide, Montana statewide property management company.
Okay.
So we're planning this next year to move into another market, maybe another two markets. We
Okay.
think it's pretty plausible for us to get to 500 units this next year,
I love it.
and we'll just kind of see how it goes. This is such a new journey for us. We're kind of feeling it out, and as we grow and
Yeah.
scale, if there's a point where like, yeah, I don't, growing's pretty painful, and so I think we've hit our pain tolerance. I don't know what that mark is going to be, um, but
Sure.
I think we've got enough things in motion that this next year we'll hit 500 doors.
And is there like a certain number of doors in a market where it starts to make sense to do the property management? Like, do you need 20 doors in a MSA before it makes sense to go in there,
Yeah,
or will you just start with onesie twosie stuff?
that's a great question. So we're kind of tweaking with our model a little bit, but we really need a market rep in each market where that person's
Hmm.
sole job is to bring us. They're kind of a business development manager almost, but then they
Sure.
get a profit share of the company. So say for example, you Randy, you're like, hey, I would love Red Door Property Management to move into our market. Then we would write up
Yep.
like a joint venture agreement that say, okay, you get 5% of all of the revenue from the doors that you bring. And so it would be
Okay.
incentive for you to say, okay, I've got this amount of doors. I've got friends that have this amount of doors. We're all going to roll it into Red Door. And so that's kind of our marketing strategy at this point.
Interesting. Okay. And are you looking primarily at geography that's close to you, or is it the factor of having a development person in a market that's really driving which markets that you're gonna look at?
Yeah, we feel pretty confident we can build a team almost anywhere. So it just depends on where we think the demand is. There's certain places in Montana where it's not appreciating, it's not growing. The rental
Hmm.
market is not strong, so we'll stay away from those. But we've identified 5 markets that we would like to be in.
Okay. And is it all long-term rental, or have you looked at the short-term rental space at all?
Yeah, well, you're the pro there. We do short-term rentals also, but I
Oh, you
will say
do?
we don't do it as well as you.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. We've got great teams behind us that are driving that business for sure. So, well, very good. Yeah, it's an interesting journey to go from, being a pastor and then moving into buying that first duplex and kind of seeing a trajectory there where that can make sense. Um, we talked a little bit about some of the lessons that you learned along the way, but I'm curious as you move into the years moving forward. You mentioned maybe 500 doors for the property management. Is there a goal that you have for the flipping business as well, or is that more based on market dynamics and
Yeah,
things like that?
yeah. I mean, we've got some soft goals around the flipping, but our market center is about 100,000 people. That's countywide, and so
Okay.
we're bumping up against an inventory issue. And so if we want to
Okay.
continue scale, then we'll probably have to move into different markets, maybe
Different
even other
markets.
states.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so we've got some soft goals for our local market. We're working with some really fantastic investor friendly agents. Um,
Okay.
and we're on their goal sheet for how many they would like to bring to us in 2024.
Okay.
So I think we'll just continue to nurture those relationships and kind of see where it goes.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. I know in this space, I was at a RIA meeting a few weeks ago, and this is all Arizona based, so I'm sure it doesn't apply to your area, but it said that we're entering kind of a scary time for flippers
Mm.
because there's so much uncertainty that's going on in the market. I'm curious, how is the economy driving your business, or is there other considerations that folks should consider if they're in the same space due to the economy?
Yeah, no, I think that's really prudent to think through that. Um, in a lot of places, appreciation rates are, they've halted or they're going backwards in some markets.
Yep.
Montana is really interesting. We're about 2 years behind everybody else. And so
Interesting.
things are still appreciating. We've got a huge supply and demand shortage in our area. And so, and even for your audience, thinking about investing, either flipping or rentals, it's really important to think exit strategy. And
Yep.
so for us, when we flipping is kind of like a last case scenario at this point. So we buy everything hoping that we're going to be able to hold it and that we'll be able to
Okay.
burr it. And if that doesn't work, then we flip it. And we run numbers based off of those two scenarios. And
Okay.
if we know that it's not going to flip, if we can't flip it at the margin that we want, then we just pass on it. And so as long,
Okay.
long as you know your exit strategy, nobody knows for sure what the market's going to do. But as long as you've
Yep.
done due diligence and you're doing prudent, you're being prudent with it, you know, I, I don't foresee in our market any reason why we should slow down.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. Now, I've talked to a lot of flippers that they talk about one of the challenges with flipping. One of the benefits is that you can make very good money in a relatively short amount of time.
Mhm.
The other side of the coin on that is that quite often you're paying quite a bit in taxes
Sure.
with a flipping business. So I'm curious, are there any strategies that you're using other than trying to buy and hold? But is there any other strategies that you're leveraging to try to help offset the tax burden that comes along with that?
Yeah, yeah. One of the things we try to do is we make sure that our flips, as much as possible, will cross calendar years, and so you move from short term to long term capital gains at that point. You can also parlay, not a 1031, but you can also parlay your funds for as long as you're not taking an income from it and you just move it from one flip to the next. You're not paying taxes on it.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's more of a deferment. You're eventually going to pay taxes on it, but
Yeah, you can kick the can down the road, but at some point
Yeah,
you can't keep kicking. So that's interesting. I didn't realize that you just simply by going from one year to the next that allows you the option to get long-term capital gains. I thought it had to be 365 days. And of course, you and I are both not CPAs and don't give legal or tax advice.
absolutely.
Check with
Yeah.
check with your local expert. But that's an interesting strategy to consider because that's a big difference. Difference between short-term and long-term capital
Mhm.
gains can be 20%
Yeah.
almost. So that is a neat strategy. And then moving dollars from project to project. I didn't realize that was an option either. So that's I suspect if you kept pushing those dollars from project to project and then potentially putting it into a long-term hold, that opens up 1031
Yes.
options and some other
Yeah.
creative tax situations as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really valuable. Thank you for sharing that,
Yeah.
and certainly something that if folks are thinking about flipping, um, certainly get with your CPA and your tax advisor to talk about those things. And for folks that are more passive investors, I think it's a good opportunity for folks to pair up with folks like Justin and many others. So, yeah, I'd love, Justin, do you have anything else you'd care to share about the business or anything else you'd care to share with the audience at this point
Trying to think.
that maybe we missed?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, that kind of covers the business side of things. Um, I think the other piece that's really important, and I'm sure your audience is educating themselves listening to your podcast, which is fantastic. But I think that's such a
Yeah,
critical piece is being a voracious learner. And so whether
yeah.
that podcasts, books, conferences, courses, whatever it is I think that's a critical piece to any business development.
Okay. Well, and that's kind of a good transition. I have a few questions I like to ask everybody. And on that note, are there any books or podcasts specifically that you would suggest to the new or newer passive investor?
Hmm. You know, great question. I mean, yes, there's a lot of books that I would recommend. Do you read Jim Rohn at all?
I love Jim Rohn.
He's
Yes,
got this.
yes. I have hours and hours and hours and hours of Jim Rohn over the
Yeah,
years. Yeah.
he's got this quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's something like, you can determine the quality of your life based off in 5 years based off of the quality of the books that you read right now. And you know, I think it's more important than identifying, saying, here's a list of books that I think are great. I think it's more beneficial, or at least equally beneficial, to understand where you're at in your season. So I think the best
Okay.
learning is at the intersection of pain and passion. And so if you know what you really where you really want to grow, and there's a pain point there, and find a resource that you can educate yourself in that area, and
Yep.
your retention rate goes through the roof. And so for me,
No doubt.
early on, I read Brandon Turner's the book with the No Money Down book.
Sure. Sure.
Gary Keller's the Millionaire Investor. I love that because it just laid a roadmap out for building your
Yep.
portfolio. Chad Carson, uh, Retire Early with Real Estate was kind of a pivotal book for me. So
Okay.
those are some great recommendations.
I love that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. There's not one book that everybody should read. It really comes down to where you are in the
Yeah,
journey and matching that with where your
yeah,
passion is, right? Because if you want to go down the short-term rental path, it doesn't make sense to look at a lot of the other
yeah,
books that are out there or something else there. So I think that intersection between pain and passion, I think, is a really great quote. And there's not a one size fits
yeah,
all. There's so many different ways that you can grow wealth through real estate
yeah,
investing. Um, and I think it's important too early on not to like um, go super deep in the first thing that you hear, because I guarantee you if you hang around long enough, you're going to hear 10 different
yeah,
things that you're super excited about. But really only one or two of those is probably going to maintain the passion longer than just the original
yeah,
honeymoon period.
yeah.
So good advice. Um, so one of the questions I like to ask folks as well is, we talked a little bit about lessons learned, but are there things that you wish you knew today that would have been really, really helpful when you started this journey?
That's another great question. It's hard to say. I mean, obviously, I wish I knew how the market would appreciate. Everybody
Yeah.
wishes they had a crystal ball to know what the market was going to do. But honestly, I don't wish that I knew anything different than what I did. And the reason I say that
Yeah.
is I think that there's such a critical there's such a critical thing that happens when you don't know everything, but you still choose to take action, that it almost
Yeah.
births this thing inside of you, or you're like, hey, I can do this. It builds confidence that you can
Yeah.
take a step of faith, and it's going to be okay, and you're going to figure it out. And so there's a lot of things that I know now that I didn't know then, but I wouldn't change it because it's part of the journey.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think back too to all the mistakes that I made throughout the whole journey, and I think it'd be real easy to say I wish that I hadn't gone through that situation. But had I not bought that first long-term rental in Kansas City from a bad operator that ended up costing me, $40,000 throughout the hold period, I would have never got to where I am
Yeah,
today. And those lessons needed to be learned throughout that path. So I could get the experience and the confidence for where we are
yeah,
today. So I'm curious where, and this is a unique question towards yours that I don't normally ask, but I'm curious how your faith has played into your process into getting into real estate and then growing multiple businesses. Like, how has that factored
yeah.
in to this whole
Yeah,
process?
that's such a great question. And I don't know what your faith journey is, Randy, but when I read the story of Jesus, when I think about the kind of God that I serve, it's a God of abundance. It's not a God of
Mm-hmm.
scarcity. And so, going back to that kind of, you know, the ability to take a faith risk, step into the unknown
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. I've got the security knowing that, hey, everything's going to be fine. Like the deal may not work how I
Yep.
envisioned it, but it's going to be fine. And not only
Yeah.
that, but I don't have to try to hoard everything. If I'm competing with somebody to get a deal and they win and I don't, I can celebrate their win because
Yeah.
we're not in a world of scarcity. There's enough opportunity for everybody, and so I can celebrate that. Um, I think that's certainly one way that's really impacted me. The other way I would say is, my mission really falls inside of the mission and the passion of Jesus. His is to,
Mm-hmm.
to bring light, love, healing everywhere. And so
Mm-hmm.
real estate is just a vehicle for me to do that. I'm not actually passionate about flipping or buying investment properties. It's a tool to get me to where I want to be. And so both Sarah and I, my wife, our goal is to generate enough income so that we can, really partner with aerial recovery. We've just briefly talked about that, so that we can really partner with churches that are, there's a spiritual component to it, but they're also working with microfinance and educating women in countries where that's not looked upon favorably, because we know if you educate a woman, it's gonna radically change a culture. So
Yep.
we want to partner with those sorts of things, and we can't do that with just a little bit of money. And so all of these
Mm-hmm.
businesses, we want to generate more and more money so that we can throw all of that toward these initiatives that we think Jesus really cares about and that we're passionate about.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, I would agree. I think that my higher power wants us all to live abundant
Yeah,
lives and to share that abundance with everyone. And you mentioned to it briefly there, but can you talk a little bit about aerial recovery and what that is and what its mission is,
yeah.
and how to learn more about it if our audience is interested in connecting
Yeah,
on that?
I would love to. I mean, aerial recovery, you can find everything that you would want, aerialrecovery.org. But their purpose is to repurpose uh, special ops and veterans coming out of the military, help them rediscover their purpose, and then redeploy them to be a force for good, combating the world's greatest evil. So they've got three initiatives. They've got one initiative called Heal the Heroes, where it's a year-long program where they kind of help these heroes go through a healing journey, and they can discover what their purpose is, and they're resourced to kind of accomplish that purpose in their spheres of influence. The other one is they've got disaster response. So anytime there's a major
Mm.
fire, major hurricane, Turkey with the earthquakes, when the war in Ukraine happened, they were there. And a lot of the times they're the first boots on the ground. They can assess the situation. They can coordinate nonprofit organizations, work with the government. I mean, you talk about, green
Yeah.
berets, special ops guys that the military has put millions of dollars into educating and developing. Now they're using this for humanitarian purposes. And then the other one is
Love it.
they actually kick down doors for sex trafficking rings, and so they're like
My
this
goodness.
spearhead going in to tackle these bad guys, and they work with local governments and police agencies, and I mean it's a pretty amazing organization.
Fantastic. Yeah, you can tell. I mean, it sounds like an amazing organization, and you can tell you just light up when you start talking about it again. So that is what I'm guessing is kind of a true North Star for you, is really living this abundant life so you can take that abundance and really put it to good cause and good work through organizations like that. Well, thank you. Thank you for your work in that area as well. What a great mission. Thank you for
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, my privilege.
All right. Well, a couple last ones here that are kind of fun is, since you and I are both in GoBundance and we have this kind of common shared theme, is there a recent bucket list item that you checked off your list, or is there one that you hope to in the near future?
Yeah, I love that. Honestly, one of the bucket list things I was able to check off this year was joining GoBundance.
Oh,
So
no
I,
kidding. Very good.
just being able to be a part of a group of people that are so intentional about the most important areas of their life. It's a phenomenal community, very giving, serving oriented community. Yeah, and it
Yep.
was something that I had thought for years I would love to be a part of, and didn't think that it would ever be a part of. It's certainly not my short-term story,
Sure.
given my financial and time constraints as a full-time pastor. But yeah, joining that this year was amazing. This next year, I'll take my family to Europe. We'll be there for probably at least a month, and just really
Fantastic.
enjoy a new culture. So yeah, that's the next one.
Very fun. Very fun. You and I actually share in both of those. My wife and I will be going to Europe this year, and joined GoBundance myself this year. Something I have been thinking about for years. So it's been an amazing journey. All right, and then finally, our last one here. If you had $100,000 to invest today,
Mm.
but you couldn't invest in your own deals, where would you invest that $100,000?
If there was an organization that had short-term rentals that were just incredible, and they were syndicating deals, that would be a really good one. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, I might know a guy or
yeah,
two that are involved in that
you
space.
know, I don't. I'm assuming people have seen your Airbnbs. I mean, I've seen them on Facebook. Your market. They are incredible, and you choose great markets. So yeah,
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. That was not staged or planned in any way, but yes, thank you. The team does amazing with those. So, well, very good. Well, Justin, last thing, of course, I'd love if you have a way that folks can contact you. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they'd like to connect and potentially invest with you, or just hear more about your journey with aerial recovery as well?
yeah, and I would love to serve. One of the things I love to do is help people that are stuck in an area of their life, and just spend some time, ask some quality questions, and help people get unstuck. So if I can serve in that capacity, I would love to. Probably Instagram would be the best. It's just Red Door Properties. There's a period in between each word. Red period door period properties.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Justin. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time. I appreciate all that you're doing as well, and the work that you're doing with aerial recovery. Thank you so much for that. And thanks so much for being on the show.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. All right. And to our audience, as always, thank you again for joining us today. Our advice is always to continue that education journey, but even more than that is to double down and make a decision to invest in your first passive investment if you have not yet. I'm convinced that once you do, you'll be so happy that you did that you'll wish you had started many, many years earlier. So be sure to join us again next Thursday for another great episode. And thank you again for joining us today.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. It was an amazing episode. We know we sure learned a lot, and we hope you did as well. We want to take a second and thank you so much for viewing or listening to this episode. And please just know that we only ask for one favor, and that is to make this life magnificent. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.